So this is what we're making, a forged pearl ring, and this is just the beginning. Now what you could do is you could contour this to whatever you want. You could set stones, gypsy set stones sideways. You could set stones on the outside. So this is just to give you the idea, and I expect you to take it and make it your own. Ciao. For this ring, we're going to use 3mm round sterling. Get your ring size. You can use an old ring if you want. If you have a ring that fits you, just measure the inside. Use your calipers. Use the inside measurement. You always zero your calipers. When you get the inside diameter, add the thickness, 3, multiplied by 3.14. That will give you the exact length. Now we're going to forge this, so what I want you to do is deduct 4 millimeters, because as we hammer this, it will make it bigger. So do all of your measurements like you normally would. When you get your total, diameter plus thickness times pi, deduct 4 millimeters. File the ends perfectly flat, form it around so the ends touch as perfectly as possible, solder it with hard solder. A number 2 cut Swiss hand file, and this is called a 6-inch hand file, I think. Yep, because the measurement is the length of the cutting surface of the file. So just hold your material vertically at the end of your bench pin, file it flat, both ends. And this has to be annealed. It is too tough to work, so we'll just heat this up until it's a dull red, quench it, and then we can form it. So we'll start with about 100 to 150 mil long flame on our Smith's mini torch. Oxygen just until the orange goes out. That's our neutral flame. If you have a propane torch or an LPG torch, LPG air, just turn it on and heat this up. When you're annealing on a soldering block, make sure that there's not a piece of solder that the piece is sitting on. Otherwise you'll have an extra lump to clean off. So I'm just about 50 mil away with this. And as you're heating sterling silver, when it's annealed, the metal will actually be dull. It won't be shiny anymore. And if you see the orange spill over the flame, that also means that it's annealed. And if you shield it with your hand from the light, you'll see that it's a pale red. And that's what we want. So at this point, we wait until it's not red, then we quench it. Once you've quenched it, pickle it, because you need to get the oxides off. It always solders better and easier if it's clean. So you could just pass a file over the end to get it clean, but it's just as easy to pickle it. So now your flat half-round pliers, and the half-round goes on the inside, and you're just going to bend this into an oval so that the ends touch perfectly. Always make sure the flat is on the outside, otherwise it'll leave two ugly marks on the inside that you have to tidy up later. Now, at this point, you can use your rawhide hammer, and you can put this on your bench plate. You can just hammer it sideways to get it closer. So I've twisted it a bit like a jump ring, so as I hammer it, it will go slightly past. And then you can just line it back up. So I'm using my parallel jaw pliers because the metal is a fairly decent size. And tough to bend, but by using a combination of hammer and pliers and all that, you'll get to the point where you get a good join ready to solder. This still has a tiny gap, and I'll use the ring bending pliers for this, and that's these ugly aggressive things. So you go opposite the join, like that, and just give it a gentle squeeze and it'll close that gap. So we want a non-existent gap, and we want these ends to line up as close as humanly possible. So that's ready to solder. So I'm going to use a 3mm long piece of hard solder. Mix up your flux always. The clear liquid on top of flux is just water, so if you don't mix this up, you'll just be putting water on your metal to keep it clean. So a fairly small amount right on the join. And what I'm going to do is pick solder this. So I'm just heating the pick until it's red, keeping the flame on, touching the solder, and it turns into a ball on the end. Then I'm going to come from underneath, because we don't want to heat our solder directly. So I'm just heating the join with the flux. When the flux goes clear, there, I'll lower my solder, and you can see it immediately jumped onto the ring and filled the join. So now, pickle, well, quench, and then pickle, and then we'll form it. So you can see, I was heating from underneath, I touched the solder on top, and because solder goes towards the flame, it has this nice little solder line on the inside. So now, pickle it. So out of the pickle, dry it off, round it up on the ring mandrel using your rawhide hammer. Now it should be nice and round at this point, and if you look at your solder join, it shouldn't have cracked. It should be just a nice smooth surface. If the ring is slightly wavy, what you do at this point is get two of your bench blocks and take the waviness out. So we want it nice and round and not like a potato chip. So tidy up your solder with your 400 grade paper on your sanding stick, and it should be fairly quick if you've done a decent job. Now we're going to go opposite our solder join, and we're going to take the flat planishing hammer, and we're going to planish this sideways, so completely opposite the join, and the top third of the ring we want to hammer until it's 1.5 millimeters thick. Make sure that you're hammering it on a smooth surface and that your hammer's nice and smooth, and that way when you're finished you'll have both sides will be nice and smooth. Okay, this is now 1.5 thick, and you can see that the shape has gone thicker and towards the top. Now we're going to turn it over and we're going to forge the bottom. I did switch to the slightly rounded side of the planishing hammer for the side. It worked better. Now for this, we're going to use the flat side of the hammer, and we're going to hammer this to 1.5 thick. Turning the ring as we work it so that we don't end up with a taper on it. So what we're going to end up with is 1.5 thick on the top this way, and then 1.5 thick this way on the bottom. So as you're hammering, work the flat part up the side so that all of this ends up with a flat profile, but don't thin it out. Just the bottom third is what we want 1.5 millimeters thick. If the metal quits working, anneal it. So anytime you're forging metal, when you're hammering, if it quits moving, anneal it, otherwise your metal's going to crack. Now, as you're forging this bottom, you should be on a ring mandrel that has the sizes. That way you can just work your way to the proper size. If it's not quite 1.5 millimeters thick, stop, because the inside will be the correct size and you can always file the outside. So this is actually 1.7, so it's slightly bigger. But you can see what I want. I want this rounded on the top. I want this flat tapering up to that top bit, wide on the bottom, and thin here. So we're forging it two different ways. We're forging it that way and that way. So now you can use your flat file on the outside and get the profile you want. And once we get that tidied up, then we're going to cut a notch for a pearl. But that's the forged basis for what we're doing. So I know the inside is the correct size, and I'm just going to leave that alone. And sorry. Everything is work hardened at the moment, which is great, because whenever you're filing metal, it's easier to work if it's work hardened. It's not quite so gummy. So your number 2 cut flat hand file, and I'm not really changing the profile of this any. I'm just smoothing out the hammer marks. And when you're forging, the majority of your work will be done for you if you use your hammers correctly. So you could see I didn't really have to file a lot on that. Now I'm going to flatten this part of the side using my flat hand file. And this will probably take a lot more work. And normally I cut a little notch in my peg so that the notch holds the ring in place. So it's not too bad, but go ahead and tidy it up, make it nice everywhere, and that way when we cut this out and put our pearl cup in, there will be minimal finishing on the rest of it.